turned out to be something she never saw coming. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the narrow winding road. It was one of those rare quiet Sundays, the kind where the world feels just a little slower. Brianna, a young, expectant mother, adjusted her rearview mirror, her belly snug against the steering wheel. She was on her way home from her aunt's house, a small family gathering in Beaumont, Texas. She had promised herself it would be a short visit, but as always, family chatter stretched longer than planned. Her car, a well-worn sedan with more miles than she cared to admit, began sputtering as she approached the old bridge that connected the town to the neighboring countryside. She frowned, tapping the gas pedal lightly. The engine coughed once, then fell silent. She coasted to a stop at the edge of the bridge, the vehicle refusing to start again. Brianna took a deep breath. She had dealt with her car's quirks before, but this was the worst timing. The bridge had no shoulder, and her car was now blocking one lane of the two-lane road. She reached for her phone to call her husband, but realized she had no signal. A wave of unease settled over her. She glanced in the rearview mirror. The road behind her was empty for now, but not for long. The distant roar of engines broke the silence. She turned to see a group of bikers approaching from the curve in the road, their silhouettes growing larger as they neared. Brianna's heart began to pound. There were 5, maybe 6 of them, clad in leather, their faces obscured by helmets. The sound of their motorcycles filled the air, echoing off the steel beams of the bridge. They were coming fast, and she had nowhere to go. She waved her arm out the window, trying to signal them to slow down, to understand her predicament, but her mind raced with questions. Would they stop? What would they do if they did? The first bike came to an abrupt halt a few feet from her bumper, the rider leaning forward slightly, as if assessing the situation. The others pulled up behind him, their engines rumbling like an unspoken warning. Brianna's breath hitched. She clutched her phone tighter, even though it was useless. Here, one of the bikers dismounted, a tall figure with broad shoulders. His boots clinked against the pavement as he walked toward her. Brianna's fingers hovered over the door lock button, her pulse quickening. Every worst-case scenario flashed through her mind, each more terrifying than the last. But something in the man's body language, calm, deliberate, suggested this encounter might not go the way she feared. Brianna's grip tightened on the steering wheel, her knuckles white as the biker approached. The others remained on their bikes, their engines still idling, their faces hidden behind the reflective visors of their helmets. To her, it looked like a scene out of a movie, a moment just before chaos erupted. The man stopped a few feet from her window, raising a gloved hand. "Hey," he called out, his voice muffled but steady. "You okay in there?" Brianna hesitated, her instincts torn between fear and the faint glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he meant no harm. Her window was down just enough for her to speak. "My car, it stalled. I can't get it to start." The man nodded, his movements measured. He stepped closer, carefully avoiding any sudden gestures. His leather jacket bore patches and insignia she couldn't decipher, and his boots looked worn for miles on the road. "Pop the hood," he said, his tone calm but firm. "Let me take a look." Brianna's heart raced. Was this a ploy? She looked past him to the group of bikers behind, now all dismounted and watching intently. It felt like the whole world had narrowed to this bridge or car. "And these men, I don't know," she replied, her voice shaky. "Look," he said, taking a step back and raising both hands slightly, palms outward. "We're not here to hurt you, but you're blocking the road. And this bridge isn't exactly the safest place to be stuck. Let us help." The words hung in the air, their weight sinking in. She studied his face, or what she could see of it, through his helmet's open visor. His eyes, sharp and steady, held no trace of malice. Against her better judgment, she reached for the latch and popped the hood. The man gave a short nod, then turned to signal one of the others. 2 more bikers approached, their movements just as cautious. Brianna watched as they lifted the hood, their voices low as they examined the engine. She still felt trapped, the tension in her chest refusing to ease. Every second felt like a gamble. "What's your name?" the first man asked, glancing back at her. "Brianna," she answered. After a pause, her voice was barely above a whisper, but he caught it well. "Brianna," he said, turning back to the car. "Looks like your battery might be shot. We'll see if we can jump it, but we'll need to move you to the side first." Her eyes darted to the edge of the bridge, the drop into the shallow creek below, enough to make her stomach turn. She hadn't even considered how close she was to the edge until now. "You think it'll work?" she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. One of the bikers shrugged. "Worth a shot," he said simply. Another fetched a set of jumper cables from his saddlebag, the tools clinking faintly in the quiet. But as they worked, another sound broke through the steady hum of the engines, the distant whine of a car horn. Brianna turned to see a pickup truck cresting the hill behind them, the driver leaning out his window and yelling something she couldn't make out. He wasn't slowing down. The bikers noticed too. One of them quickly stepped into the road, waving the truck to stop. "Hold up, man, there's a breakdown here." But the driver didn't seem to care. he slammed on the brakes just feet from a biker, throwing the truck into park, and jumping out a burly man with a red baseball cap stormed toward the group, his voice booming. "What the hell's going on here?" he shouted. His eyes darted to Brianna, then to the biker's, suspicion and hostility written all over his face. "You messing with her?" Brianna felt her throat tighten. The tension, already thick now, felt unbearable. But before anyone could speak, the lead biker stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "We're helping her. You got a problem with that?" The man in the red cap squared his shoulders, his jaw tight, as he glanced between the bikers and Brianna. "Helping her, huh?" he said, his tone laced with doubt. "A bunch of you dressed like that. Forgive me if I don't buy it." The lead biker tilted his head, his body language steady, unshaken. "You see something wrong with helping a woman stuck on a bridge?" he shot back, his voice calm but firm. The other bikers stood silently behind him, their presence alone adding to the tension. Brianna wanted to speak, to clarify what was happening, but fear held her back. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel as she watched the exchange, the uneasiness in her chest growing with every second. The man from the truck took another step forward, but one of the bikers, shorter but stockier, intervened, stepping into his path. "Listen, man," he said, "we don't want any trouble. She's stranded. We're trying to get her out of here safely." "Yeah, and what are you going to do, tough guy, if I don't believe you?" The truck driver spat, his voice rising. He glanced toward Brianna. "Hey, you all right, you want me to call someone?" Brianna hesitated, her voice caught in her throat. The lead biker turned to her, his eyes softening as if to say, "It's your call." Finally she found the courage to speak. They're helping me. "My car won't start," she said, her voice trembling but audible. For a moment the truck driver seemed to falter, his bravado wavering, but before he could say more, the lead biker stepped closer, gesturing to the truck. "Look, man, you want to help? Fine, park your truck, grab a flashlight, and make yourself useful. Otherwise, get out of the way." The boldness in his tone silenced everyone. The truck driver looked at him, then at the others, as if weighing his options. With a grumble, he threw his hands up. "Fine, do what you want," he said, retreating to his vehicle. The tension eased slightly as the bikers got back to work. They hooked up the jumper cables and instructed Brianna to turn the key. The engine sputtered, groaned, and finally roared back to life. Relief flooded her body, her shoulders sagging as the fear began to dissipate. The lead biker closed the hood, giving it a solid pat before turning back to her window. "You're good to go, but take it easy. That battery might not last long." Brianna blinked, still processing everything. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Don't worry about it," he replied. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "We're not all bad. You know, don't believe everything you see on TV." Before she could respond, he turned back to his group, motioning for them to mount their bikes. The roar of their engines filled the air again as they prepared to leave. But then something unexpected happened. The truck driver, now leaning against his vehicle, called out, "Hey, sorry for jumping to conclusions. Guess I was wrong." The lead biker glanced at him, nodded, and climbed onto his motorcycle. Without a word, the group rolled out in unison, the sound of their engines fading into the distance. Brianna sat in her car, stunned. The moment had been so charged with fear and suspicion, yet it had ended with unexpected kindness. She looked out at the road ahead, her heart still racing, but this time for a different reason. But the day wasn't over yet, and what she would soon discover would make her reflect on this encounter even more deeply. Brianna cautiously pulled her car off the bridge and onto the gravel shoulder just beyond it, her hands still trembling slightly. She needed a moment to breathe, to process what had just happened. She replayed the scene in her mind, the biker's calm demeanor, the truck driver's hostility, and the way everything had shifted in a matter of minutes. It was surreal, like stepping out of one story and into another. She sat there for a moment, watching the taillights of the truck disappear down the road. Then she caught her reflection in the rear-view mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but there was a flicker of something else. Gratitude. Those bikers had helped her despite everything she had feared. When they first approached, as she turned her key to head home, she noticed something on the passenger seat that hadn't been there before, a small patch black with white stitching folded neatly. It must have been left behind by one of the bikers when they were working on her car. She picked it up, examining the intricate embroidery. The design featured a winged skull and the words "Road Guardians" stitched beneath it. Her curiosity piqued. She made a mental note to look it up later, but for now, she needed to get home and let her husband know what had happened. As she merged back onto the road, her car's engine held steady, though she could feel it struggling with every mile. About 10 minutes from home, her phone buzzed with a faint signal. She immediately called her husband, Devin, recounting the ordeal in a breathless rush. "I thought it was going to end badly," she admitted, her voice shaking, "but they were so different from what I expected." Devin listened patiently, his tone calm and reassuring. "Sounds like you ran into some decent folks," he said. "Not everyone's out to hurt you, Bree. Sometimes help comes from the places you least expect." His words stuck with her as she pulled into their driveway. The familiar sight of their modest one-story house bringing her some comfort, she turned off the engine, and sat in silence for a moment staring at the patch in her hand. Devin greeted her at the door, his arms wrapping around her protectively. "You're okay?" he said softly. "That's all that matters." She nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that the patch in her hand held a deeper meaning. "Devin," she said, pulling back slightly, "I think they were part of some group. They left this." He looked at the patch, his brow furrowing. "Road Guardians," he read aloud. "Sounds like a biker charity or something. Maybe they do this kind of thing often." Brianna's eyes widened. "To charity? You think they go around helping people?" "It wouldn't surprise me," Devin replied. "Some of those groups are about more than just riding. They've got codes, missions. They probably saw you needed help and stepped up." Brianna felt a swell of emotion, her earlier fears now replaced by a profound sense of respect. She decided to look them up, but before she could, there was a knock at the door, but the person standing on their porch wasn't who they expected, and the next twist would leave them speechless. Devin opened the door cautiously, his body slightly angled to shield Brianna from whoever was on the other side. Standing there, illuminated by the porch light, was one of the bikers, the lead one, the same man who had helped on the bridge. He wasn't wearing his helmet now, and his rugged features were more human than intimidating. His eyes held a calm sincerity that immediately put Brianna on edge, but also piqued her curiosity. "Evening," he said, his voice steady but low. "Sorry bother you folks. I just wanted to make sure you made it home." "All right." Devin glanced back at Brianna, who had frozen in place just behind him. "She's fine," Devin said cautiously. "Thanks for helping her out back there." The man nodded, shifting his weight slightly. "Good. That's good to hear. I didn't want to leave without making sure. You never know what might happen on that bridge." Brianna finally stepped forward, the patch still in her hand. "You left this," she said, holding out to him. He looked down at the patch, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That wasn't an accident," he said. "It's a little something we leave behind when we help someone, kind of our way of saying you're not alone." Brianna's fingers tightened around the fabric as she stared at him, her emotions a swirling mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why go out of your way for someone you don't even know?" The man leaned against the door frame, his gaze steady. "Because someone once did it for me," he said simply. "A long time ago, I was stranded on the side of the road, and a stranger stopped to help. He didn't have to, but he did. Told me you pass it on when it's your turn. So that's what I've been doing ever since." Brianna felt her chest tighten, her earlier fear giving way to an overwhelming sense of respect. She had spent so much time judging this man and his group by their appearance, assuming the worst, and yet here he was standing on her porch, offering nothing but kindness. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice steadier now. "Eli," he said, "and if you ever find yourself in trouble again, you look us up, the Road Guardians. We're not too hard to find." Before they could say anything more, he gave a polite nod and turned to leave. Brianna watched as he climbed onto his motorcycle, the engine roaring to life before he rode off into the night. She stood there for a moment, the patch still in her hand, her mind racing with everything that had happened. Devin closed the door, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Looks like there's still good people out there," he said softly. Brianna nodded, her heart full as she looked at the patch one more time. "Yes," she said quietly. "Sometimes they're not who you expect." The next day, Brianna couldn't stop thinking about what Eli had said. She looked up the Road Guardians and discovered they were in fact a national group dedicated to helping stranded motorists and supporting families in need. Their motto, "Ride to Protect," resonated deeply with her. She decided to share her story on a community forum, describing the kindness she'd experienced and encouraging others to rethink their assumptions about people. The post quickly gained attention, with others sharing similar encounters with unexpected helpers. Sometimes the lessons life teaches us come in the most unexpected ways. Brianna realized that the world wasn't as divided as it seemed, and kindness often came from places we least imagined. She vowed to carry that lesson forward and one day to pass it on when it was her turn. If this story touched you, take a moment to reflect on how small acts of kindness can change someone's life. Share this story, and remember, never judge someone by their appearance. Together we can build a world where kindness isn't the exception, it's the rule. Subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of our shared humanity.